want to kind of clear up a little confusion over kind of the relationship here. Oftentimes I go to events in Washington and people come up to me and they say, tell your father I'm a big supporter. I'm supporting your father. And then when I tell them that my father owns a liquor store in Worcester, Massachusetts, I keep supporting him. They get a little bit, But I am so happy to see so many people here, and I'm so proud to be with my friend George McGovern. My first political experience was in 1972. I was in junior high school, and I was passing out literature in my neighborhood for George McGovern. On election night in 1972, I remember listening to my transistor radio and hearing the returns come in and being overjoyed that he comfortably carried Massachusetts. I was a little depressed over the other 949 states, but that's their problem. I continue to believe that this country and this world would be a hell of a lot better off today had George McGovern won and Richard Nixon won. I went to college. I worked for him in his Senate office, and we have maintained a close relationship ever since. He really is my best friend, and I got to tell you, he's my political hero. He is not only the conscience of the Democratic Party. I think he's kind of the Obi-Wan Kenobi of the Democratic Party. When I have trouble on an issue, I often try to give him a call or read something that he has written and to try to get some guidance. This is a guy who, has enjoyed some great victories, but also suffered some pretty big political defeats. But he is one of the most idealistic individuals I have ever met in my life. And as he approaches his 90th birthday, I just want to say that I wish I had a tenth of his energy right now. And let me just close with this before I introduce him. The one thing I really admire about George McGovern, among many things, but the one thing that stands out is that throughout his entire career, he has been a steadfast and consistent voice for peace. And I want to tell you, he's also been an outspoken proponent of trimming down our overbloated military budget. He understands that national security means jobs, it means housing, it means a clean environment, it means a whole bunch of other things in the number of missiles we have. So having said that, he's here, and I'm honored to be able to introduce to you the man who should have been President of the United States. And if he ran again, I'd go for him right now, quite frankly. George McGovern.
I agree with every word of that, especially all the good things he said about me. Well, what shall I say today? I'm just tremendously happy to be back in Massachusetts, and especially this part of the state. I walked around Northampton last evening, and again this morning, and I don't know, it just seems to me that if there's such a thing as a heaven on earth, it must be here in Massachusetts. I was in a series of televised debates with the late William F. Buckley, now deceased, and believe it or not, he and I became personal friends during that period. I didn't agree with much he said, and he didn't agree with much I said, but I was reminded again that us human beings do have a bond with other people. But we were having a debate in the Cow Palace in San Francisco. Did you know there was such a place? You know, there was a guy from San Francisco ribbing me one day about the Corn Palace in Mitchell, South Dakota. And I said, look, we feed that corn to the cows, and that's how you got the Cow Palace, San Francisco. But anyway, when Bill was introduced to that San Francisco audience, he got a smattering of applause. I actually felt a little sorry for him. And he introduced me, and it was an introduction something like Jim's, although maybe not quite that extravagant. But I got a great round of applause. So when Bill took the floor to deliver his opening part of the debate, he said, of course, I noticed the tenor of this argument. You're very lukewarm, to say the least, about Bill Buckley, and you're red hot for George McGovern. But he said, I just want to remind you that when this guy ran for president in 1972, he only carried the state of Massachusetts. The other 49 went with him. So I had to make a retort to that, and I said, you know, how many people in this auditorium think that if Bill Buckley had run for president, that he would have carried Massachusetts? I wrote this little book. I try to avoid these 900-page books. I have a lot of them on my shelves that I'm going to read someday. But this one is not all that big, and it has a very simple title, What It Means to Be a Democrat. What I've tried to do in this book is to say what the Democrats are for. I don't talk much about what we're against, although there are certain things that we oppose. But I'm getting a little weary these days of listening to these Republican candidates for the presidency, the fellow from Pennsylvania, and I can't, what's his name? Anyway, you know him. And Newt Gingrich, we all know Newt Gingrich, and the rest of them. They talk as though all evil goes out from the federal government in Washington, D.C., that all the troubles could be resolved if we just diminished the influence and the reach of the federal government. I don't agree with that. I'm here today partly because I came back as a bomber pilot from World War II and had this wonderful GI Bill of Rights. It's one of the great things the federal government's ever done. 8 million GIs who participated in that war. And I fully endorsed American participation in World War II. We had to stop Hitler. It was crazy. But he had the power to take over Europe, and we'd have been next on his list. We had to stop Tojo after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. We had to stop Mussolini. So I make no apology for participating in that war, although I have different view about most of the wars since then. But in any event, they had this great GI Bill, and we could go to any university in the country, and the government paid all the expenses, plus giving us a cost of living, a stipend. I had a wife and one child at that time, and we got enough to live on. It was pretty lean pickings, but I got through Northwestern University to a PhD in history, and I've treasured that education every day of my life. I just wish everybody in public life knew a little of our history. What that did was to permit 8 million young men like myself, young women, to go to any university in the country. If they wanted to go to Harvard, fine. If they wanted to go to Amherst, fine. They could go anywhere they wanted, and they got a good education. And you know, it cost an enormous amount of money, but you know something? It paid back to the federal government $2 for every dollar that they shelled out. Why? Because us college graduates, some of us graduate school graduates, for the rest of our lives we paid higher taxes than we otherwise would have, because we had more earning power. We were worth more to the economy, and so we paid more taxes, and the government reaped that. They still get it from me every year. I'm paying now for as long as I can remember it, and that's true with all the others. So it's that kind of thing that makes me appreciate the federal government. I'm glad we've got a Food and Drug Administration to make sure that our food and our drugs are safe. I'm glad that we have an education department to try to raise the standards of education. I'm glad that we have public assistance for people that are too poor or too handicapped or too down on their luck to support themselves. I'm glad even for things like the interstate highway system and so many other things that the federal government does. In South Dakota, we glory that we now have electricity in all the farm homes. Used to be, as a teenager, I learned to fly fairly early. I'd fly across South Dakota sometime at night, and I couldn't see a light anywhere. Until you get to an airport, there might be a little beacon out there. But now we got electricity in every home. The REA, Rural Electrification Administration. It didn't cost the taxpayers much of anything. Those REAs pay for themselves. The government loaned them money at 2%, and they paid it back. And so now every rural state has the same kind of electricity that you have here. Well, those are the things I talk about in this book, what it means to be a Democrat. And I think I should sit down at this point and I'll start signing books. Thanks so much.